In every military base, there are rules, but there are also lines that should never be crossed. She was the only woman among 50 men, a cadet who carried more courage in her heart than strength in her arms. Her name was Liana Ward. To most, she was just another trainee, but to one man, a man feared by everyone, she became a target. That morning, the general wanted to prove a point, but what he didn't know was that this quiet girl would become the lesson of his life. When he grabbed her by the hair in front of the entire base, no one spoke, no one moved. Yet in that silence, something powerful was born, because humiliation can break the weak, but it awakens the warrior inside. The brave Dot. This is not just a story about discipline or power, it's about the moment a soldier decided to stand for respect. And what she did next shocked everyone who ever doubted her. Hey, before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from. If you love real stories about real people, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. The sun had barely risen over Fort Raleigh base, yet the parade ground already shimmered with heat and tension. A long line of cadets stood perfectly still, boots shining, chins up, uniforms pressed to perfection. Among them stood Cadet Liana Ward, the only female in her platoon. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from determination. 3 months ago, she was just a small-town girl who dreamed of becoming a soldier like her late father, Captain Aaron Ward, who never returned from his final mission. Now, every step she took in those heavy boots felt like a promise she was keeping to his memory. But Fort Raleigh was not a place of kindness. It was a place of hierarchy, power, and unspoken cruelty. Especially under General Marcus Doyle, a man feared by everyone from captains to cooks. He ruled the base with an iron fist and an iron heart. That morning, Liana noticed the general's black SUV parked near the training field. The moment she saw it, her pulse tightened. The rumors about him weren't just stories. He was known for humiliating cadets publicly to build discipline. But what he did that day, no one could ever forget. Cadet Ward. His voice thundered across the field like an explosion. Liana froze. Yes, sir. The general's boots crushed the gravel as he approached her. His shadow fell over her face. You call that attention stance? Look at your line. You're off by an inch. Her heart pounded. She knew she wasn't off. She had measured that spacing twice. But the general's mood wasn't about precision, it was about dominance. I can fix it, sir, she said calmly. He stepped closer. You think you know better than your commanding officer, cadet? No, sir. He stared at her for a long, burning second, and then suddenly, in front of everyone, he grabbed a handful of her hair and yanked her head back. Gasps rippled through the line of cadets. No one dared to move. You stand straight when I talk to you, he barked, his grip tightened, his eyes cold and merciless. Liana's scalp burned, but she didn't cry out. Not once. She looked him straight in the eyes, the same calm, defiant eyes her father once had when he faced impossible odds. Permission to speak, sir, she whispered, her voice shaking but steady. General Doyle sneered. You don't ask permission after insubordination. And then, just as quickly as he'd grabbed her, he shoved her away. Get off my field, he growled. You're not soldier material. You're a disgrace. Liana stumbled but didn't fall. Her boots held her steady. She saluted perfectly, sharply, then turned and walked off the field. Every cadet watched her in stunned silence. But no one said a word. Not yet. Later that night, Liana sat alone on her bunk in the dim barracks. Her scalp still hurt where he had pulled her hair. She touched the sore spot gently, her hand trembling with suppressed rage. Outside, laughter echoed from the male dormitory. The same cadets who had watched everything but stayed silent. Her friend, Private Mason, one of the few who respected her, slipped in quietly. Liana, I'm sorry. What he did. It wasn't right. She didn't look up. Then why didn't anyone say anything? Mason sighed. Because that's Doyle. You speak against him, you're done. Liana's voice was cold. Then maybe someone should end him. Mason looked alarmed. You don't mean I mean, she interrupted. I'm not quitting. I came here to serve, not to be broken. She opened her father's old notebook, the one she carried everywhere. Inside, a quote he had written stared back at her. True strength isn't in how hard you hit, it's in how long you stand after being hit. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. That night, she made herself a silent promise. She would never let humiliation define her. She would make the general regret the day he touched her, and the way she'd do it would shock the entire base. The next morning, Fort Raleigh woke to the usual sounds, boots marching, rifles clattering, the whistle of the drill instructor cutting through the fog. But among the rows of tired cadets, one face no longer looked uncertain. Cadet Liana Ward had changed overnight. She wasn't broken anymore. She was focused. When she stepped onto the field again, every eye turned toward her. Some whispered in disbelief. She came back. After what Doyle did, but she ignored them all. Even General Marcus Doyle, watching from his office window, froze for a second when he saw her. The nerve of this girl, he thought, after being humiliated in front of everyone, she dares to show up again. That defiance was dangerous. During tactical drills that day, the sun was merciless. Cadets crawled through mud, climbed rope walls, and dragged heavy dummies under barbed wire. Liana did it all, faster than most. Her uniform was soaked, her palms bleeding, but she didn't stop. Not even when her hands shook or when the instructor barked insults meant to break her. And when she reached the final obstacle, the 10-foot wall, she paused for just 1 second. Staring at the top, her muscles trembling. The other cadets hesitated behind her. Then she jumped. Her fingers barely caught the ledge, nails scraping the rough wood. She gritted her teeth, pulled herself up, and threw her body over the wall with a guttural cry that echoed across the field. When she landed on the other side, the instructors fell silent. Even Doyle, watching from afar, clenched his jaw. He didn't like that sound. It wasn't the cry of pain. It was the roar of defiance. That night, Doyle summoned her. The message was short. Cadet Ward, report to the general's office at 2100 hours. Mason looked pale when he read it over her shoulder. He's going to break you, Liana, don't go alone. She zipped up her jacket. If I don't go, I lose. If I do go, maybe I get to see who he really is. At exactly 2100 hours, she knocked on his door. Enter. The room smelled of whiskey and old leather. Maps of war zones hung on the wall. The general sat behind his desk, a half-empty glass in his hand, his medals glinting in the lamplight. Cadet Ward, he said slowly, you've been causing quite a stir. She saluted crisply. Just doing my duty, sir. Duty, he laughed, leaning back. Your duty was to follow orders, not make a spectacle of yourself. With respect, sir, she said, her voice calm, I didn't ask to be the spectacle. His smile faded. You're brave, I'll give you that. But this place doesn't need brave women. It needs obedient soldiers. Her hands curled into fists behind her back. Obedience isn't loyalty, sir. He stood up. The room suddenly felt smaller. You're walking a dangerous line, Ward. So are you, she replied softly. He stepped closer until she could smell the alcohol on his breath. You think because you're your father's daughter, you get to talk to me like that. Her breath caught. You knew my father. Oh, I knew him, Doyle said with a smirk. He was under my command once. Good soldier, to softer-hearted. That's why he died. Something inside, Liana snapped a thread of pain she'd held for years, but she didn't move, didn't shout. She simply stared at him. Is that all, sir? She asked quietly. He sneered. You're dismissed. As she turned to leave, he added, you'll never make it past evaluation week. I'll make sure of it. She stopped at the door, then said, without turning around, you can try, sir, but I won't break like you did. For the first time, General Doyle didn't have a comeback. Back in the barracks, Mason waited anxiously. What did he say? Liana dropped her cap on the table. He said he'd destroy me. And you? She smiled faintly. Then I'll just have to destroy his plan first. Mason frowned. Liana pulled a flash drive from her pocket, one she had quietly taken from the corner of Doyle's desk when he wasn't looking. Let's just say, she whispered, the general's got secrets. And the truth always has a way of exploding. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, as if the base itself sensed a storm coming. And for the first time since her father's death, Liana felt powerful. The night air around Fort Raleigh base was thick with rain and secrecy. The storm that had rolled in earlier refused to leave, drumming against the metal roofs like the heartbeat of something restless. Inside the cadet dormitory, the lights were dimmed, and silence hung like a fragile veil. But at the far end of the barracks, Cadet Liana Ward sat awake, her laptop glowing faintly in the dark. The small flash drive she'd taken from General Doyle's desk lay beside her, a single piece of forbidden metal that could end careers, or her own. She hesitated before plugging it in. Once she opened it, there would be no going back. But then she remembered the way Doyle's hand had twisted her hair, the cruel smirk on his face, and his words, you'll never make it. Her jaw tightened. We'll see about that, she whispered. She inserted the drive. Her breath caught. She opened it cautiously. Inside were reports, operational logs, payment transfers, and encrypted documents. But one file stood out. Mission Ward, _intercept.docx. She clicked it open. The words hit her like a punch. Operation terminated. Agent Ward compromised during recon. Termination order approved by commanding officer, General Marcus Doyle. Her father hadn't been killed in crossfire like the military had claimed. He had been terminated, executed, under Doyle's command. Her chest felt hollow. Her eyes burned with tears she could no longer hold. The man who had humiliated her wasn't just her superior, he was her father's executioner. Mason, who had been standing guard by the door, saw her face pale. Liana, what is it? She turned the screen toward him. He went silent. My God, he killed him, she said hoarsely. He killed my father and called it duty. Mason swallowed hard. If this leaks, Doyle's finished, but you'll be finished too. I don't care, she said through gritted teeth. I just want the truth. The next day, training went on as usual, but Liana was no longer the same. When the instructors barked commands, she followed them with robotic precision. When Doyle appeared on the field, she didn't even blink. He noticed, he always noticed. After the drill, he called out, Cadet Ward, stay behind. The other cadets left quickly. Leaving her standing alone on the damp gravel, he approached slowly, his tone deceptively calm. You've been digging into things you shouldn't, haven't you? Liana's blood ran cold. I don't know what you mean, sir. Oh, you do, he said, circling her like a predator. You think I don't know you were in my office last night? My desk drawer isn't a mystery to me. Liana stood her ground. You're mistaken, sir. Doyle's smile was like ice. You've got guts, Ward, but guts won't save you. If I find proof, you're done. Expelled may be worse. She didn't flinch. Then you'd better find proof, sir. He stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. Careful, cadet, you're playing with fire. Her eyes didn't waver. Maybe fire's the only way to cleanse rot. He stared at her for a long second, then laughed softly, not in amusement, but in fury restrained. Dismissed. That night, Liana met Mason again in the mess hall after hours. The rain outside had turned into a steady pour, muting the sounds of the camp. I copied everything, she said, sliding a small notebook across the table. But I need proof from the archives, the original authorization files. Mason frowned. That's in the command data center. It's locked behind 2 checkpoints and guarded 24/7. She smirked faintly. Then we'll need a distraction. Mason looked uneasy. You're not thinking straight. If they catch you, they won't. There was something terrifyingly calm in her voice, now the quiet of someone who had nothing left to lose. 2 nights later, when the base lights dimmed for curfew, Liana and Mason slipped out through the east corridor. The sound of thunder masked their footsteps as they moved between shadows. They reached the first checkpoint, an unmanned security gate, and Mason's keycard did the rest. At the second door, Liana crouched and used a small screwdriver from her training kit to override the manual lock. Her father had once taught her how to bypass field locks. Never depend on permission when justice is denied. The door clicked open. They entered the command data center. Rows of computers humming under red emergency lights. Liana went straight to the terminal labeled Classified Personnel Archive. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Come on, she muttered. Then, there it was, the full authorization log from her father's final mission. And at the bottom of the document, in bold signature, approved by General Marcus Doyle. Got it, she whispered. We haven't. But then the door behind them slammed open. Step away from the terminal. It was Doyle. He stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 MPs, his expression unreadable. Liana froze. Mason's heart stopped. Didn't I tell you, Cadet Ward? Doyle said quietly. Fire burns everything, even those who light it. And then he gave the order. Arrest them both. The cold metal cuffs bit into Liana Ward's wrists as she was dragged through the rain-soaked courtyard of Fort Raleigh Base. The mud splashed against her boots. The night sky split by lightning. Soldiers stood at attention as General Marcus Doyle watched from the steps of the command building. Expressionless. To everyone else, it looked like a criminal being brought to justice. But to Liana, it was the truth being buried alive. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. She simply stared ahead, jaw locked, eyes hard as steel. They threw her into a holding room, small, dim, and cold. A single bulb flickered overhead. Mason sat opposite her, his face pale and bloodied. I'm sorry, he whispered. I shouldn't have come with you. She shook her head. You shouldn't apologize for doing what's right. Moments later, the heavy metal door opened. Doyle entered, flanked by 2 officers. Leave us, he ordered. The guards hesitated, then obeyed. The door shut. The room fell into silence. Doyle walked slowly toward Liana, his boots echoing on the concrete floor. You know, he said, voice cold. Your father had the same look in his eyes before I gave the order. Her heart twisted, but she didn't look away. He smirked. You think you've exposed me, but what you've done is treason. You hacked a classified network, accessed top-secret data, and disobeyed command. That's enough to bury your name forever. She leaned forward, her voice trembling but firm. My father died because of you. I won't let his death be rewritten as loyalty. He laughed under his breath. You're a soldier, Ward. You follow orders. I follow honor, she snapped. Something you wouldn't understand. The general's jaw tightened. His hand slammed onto the metal table, the sound like a gunshot. You will retract everything. You'll write a statement saying you fabricated the files, or I'll have you court-martialed before sunrise. Liana looked up. Terrifyingly calm. Then court-martial me. For the first time, Doyle's mask cracked. You're playing a dangerous game, Cadet. She smiled faintly. So are you. The next morning, the base buzzed with rumors. 2 cadets arrested. Unauthorized data breach. The general furious, the officers whispering. But something strange happened at dawn. A message appeared on every internal screen across the base. A short video file titled, Truth of Operation Orion. The same file Liana had downloaded. It showed the mission documents, the communication logs, and finally a voice recording from years ago. This is Captain Aaron Ward. We've been ambushed. No extraction team in sight. Request immediate evac. Negative, came Doyle's voice. You're compromised. Captain, no witnesses. You know the order. Sir, you can't. That's an order. The audio ended in static. The entire base froze. Soldiers looked at one another in horror. Officers stared at the screen, speechless. By the time Doyle stormed into the communications room, the damage was done. Every person on the base had heard it. Who authorized this broadcast? He roared, but the technician only stammered. Sit, came from your own secure network. He turned pale, and then he understood. Back in her holding cell, Liana smiled faintly as the power flickered. She looked up at the ceiling camera. You wanted obedience, she whispered. I gave you exposure instead. Mason, sitting beside her, stared in disbelief. You uploaded it. But, how? She grinned through the bruises. Before they caught us, I triggered an autosend from the data terminal. It was set to deploy at sunrise. Outside, alarms blinked. Voices shouted. The storm raged harder than ever. Liana, Mason whispered, they'll come for you. They already did, she said quietly. Now the whole world will come for him. Hours later, the military ethics division arrived by helicopter. Black coats, stern faces, sealed orders. They walked straight into Doyle's office and emerged minutes later. When they escorted him out, his uniform was stripped of medals. The same soldiers who once saluted him now looked away in shame as Doyle was driven past the courtyard. His eyes locked with Liana's. She was standing there in her torn uniform, wrists still bruised, rain pouring down her face. No words were exchanged, but everything was said in that silence. He looked away first. That night, the base was quiet again, eerily quiet. Mason found her standing by the flagpole, where her father's name was engraved among fallen heroes. What happens now? He asked softly. She traced the letters with her fingers. Justice happened. That's enough for me. He looked at her, admiration in his eyes. You're not just your father's daughter, Liana, you're his legacy. For the first time, she smiled, not out of victory, but peace. The rain slowed, the clouds parted, and the first rays of dawn stretched across the field. For the soldiers of Fort Raleigh, it was a new morning. For Liana Ward, it was freedom. 2 weeks had passed since the storm that changed Fort Raleigh base forever. The rain was gone, but the echoes of that night still lingered in every hallway, every training field, every soldier's eyes. General Marcus Doyle was no longer there. The once feared name had been erased from the command list, stripped of rank, medals, and pride. In his place stood something new, the beginning of truth. Liana Ward was still at the base, though not as a prisoner anymore. The court had cleared her of all charges. The military ethics division had called her actions an act of moral courage. Under oppressive authority, she didn't care about the recognition. All she wanted was one thing: to restore her father's honor. That morning, she stood in front of the old memorial wall. Names of the fallen were engraved in brass plates, their stories mostly forgotten, except by those who served beside them. Her father's name, Captain Aaron Ward, was still there, but something had always been missing: the truth. She held a small metal plaque in her hands. It read, "Executed under false command. Honored in truth by his daughter, Cadet Liana Ward." She took a deep breath and fixed the plaque beneath his name, tightening the screws with trembling fingers. When she stepped back, the sunlight caught the brass letters, and for the first time, they gleamed like gold. Ward. She turned. It was Colonel Pierce, the newly assigned base commander, a man known for his fairness. "You've got visitors," he said with a smile. Liana frowned slightly. Visitors. Behind him, dozens of cadets marched into the courtyard, the same ones who had stood silent that day when Doyle humiliated her. But this time, they came not out of fear, but respect. Each one carried a white rose. They lined up before her silently, placing the roses beneath her father's name. One by one, they saluted her, not because she was a superior, but because she had shown them what courage truly meant. Mason was the last to step forward. "You stood when we didn't," he said quietly. "That's something this base will never forget." She blinked back tears. "We all stood, eventually. That's what matters." Later that afternoon, a small ceremony was held on the parade ground. The flag her father once saluted, tattered and old, was replaced by a new one. As it rose on the pole, the wind caught it, spreading the fabric wide against the blue sky. The anthem played softly through the speakers, and the entire base stood in silence. Liana's heart ached as she watched the flag climb higher. For a moment, she could almost feel her father's presence beside her, that same calm strength she'd missed for years. "You kept your promise, Dad," she whispered, "and I kept mine." After the ceremony, Mason found her near the training field, the very spot where it had all begun. "Do you ever wish you'd done things differently?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "No, because if I had, he'd still be a hero only in my heart. Now he's a hero in truth." He nodded. "What will you do now?" She looked toward the horizon where the sun was setting, the same golden hue that had once lit her father's medals. "I'm going to finish training," she said, "and when I graduate, I'll request assignment overseas, anywhere they need someone who still believes in honor." Mason chuckled softly. "You really are your father's daughter." She grinned. "No, I'm just a soldier who refused to bow." That night, when the base lights dimmed, Liana sat by her bunk and opened her father's old notebook one last time. There was one final line she hadn't noticed before, faded ink, written on the very last page: "If they ever silence the truth, Let my blood be the ink that writes it again. Tears blurred her vision as she closed the notebook and held it close to her chest. Outside, the flag her father never saw, fly now waved proudly in the wind, not for generals, not for power, but for truth, and beneath that sky, Cadet Liana Ward finally smiled. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't fighting anymore, she was free. Thanks for watching till the very end. I put a lot of heart into sharing stories like this, and if it connected with you in any way, I'd love to know. Drop a comment, hit like, maybe share it with someone who'd get it too. You being here honestly means the world.